Today, we're going to be talking about some truly bizarre true crime cases. Like seriously, some of the weirdest ones I've ever come across. I have my coffee, I have my palate, so let's get into it. We're going to be counting down 10 cases that are so strange, so unexplainable, that they honestly sound like they were ripped straight from a horror movie script. But the thing is, they're all real. Every single one of them. It just goes to show you that sometimes, the truth is way, way stranger than anything a writer could ever dream up. These stories are filled with cryptic clues, unidentified victims, and mysteries that have stumped investigators for decades. We're talking about things that just don't make sense, no matter how you look at them. It's the kind of stuff that will keep you up at night, just thinking, how could that even happen? I'm really curious to know if you guys have heard of any of these, because some of them are pretty well known in the true crime community, but others are a little more obscure. So as we go through this countdown, make sure to pop down into the comments and let me know if any of these cases are new to you, or if you have your own theories about what went down. I love reading what you guys think, and sometimes you all come up with ideas that I had never even considered. Okay, are you ready? Let's dive into the top 10 most bizarre true crime cases ever recorded. This is going to be a wild one, so buckle up. Okay, so kicking off our list at number 10 is a case that is just chilling to the bone. We're heading back to 1922 to a remote little farmstead in Germany called Hinterkaifeck. This isn't just a murder mystery, it's like the beginning of a folk horror tale. The farm was owned by the Gruber family, Andreas and Kazilia Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her two young children, Kazilia and Josef. They pretty much kept to themselves, which is why what happened next is so deeply unsettling. The whole thing starts with a series of really strange events leading up to the murders. Andreas, the patriarch of the family, started telling his neighbors about some weird things happening around the farm. He found a set of footprints in the fresh snow leading from the forest to the farmhouse, but here's the creepy part. There were no footprints leading back. It was like someone had walked to their home and just vanished into thin air. He also heard footsteps in the attic and found an unfamiliar newspaper on the property. It's the kind of thing that would make the hair on your arm stand up, you know? Like you're being watched. Then, one of the house keys went missing, and a few days before the murders, the family's maid quit abruptly. She was convinced the house was haunted and said she couldn't stay there another night. She packed her bags and left, which honestly probably saved her life. The Grubers had to hire a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who arrived at the farm on March 31st, 1922. It was her very first day on the job, and tragically, it would also be her last. That same evening, something terrible happened. It seems the family members were lured one by one into the barn. Andreas, Kazilia, Victoria, and little Kazilia were all led to the barn and brutally murdered with a mattock, which is like a pickaxe. The killer then went inside the house and murdered the 2-year-old Joseph in his crib and the new maid, Maria, in her bedchamber. The scene was just pure carnage. It was a level of violence that shocked the entire country. What makes this case even more bizarre is what happened after the murders. The killer, or killers, didn't just flee the scene. No, they stayed for several days. The neighbors noticed that smoke was still coming from the chimney, and the cattle were still being fed. Someone was living in the house with the bodies of the family they had just slaughtered. They ate the food in the kitchen, slept in the beds, and took care of the farm animals before finally leaving. It's a level of audacity that is just mind-boggling. When the family wasn't seen for a few days, neighbors went to check on them and discovered the horrific scene. The investigation was massive, but it ultimately went cold. Over 100 suspects were interviewed over the years, but no one was ever charged. The heads of the victims were even sent to Munich for examination by clairvoyants, but that led nowhere. To this day, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of Germany's most infamous and baffling unsolved crimes. Who would do this, and why would they stay? Alright, next up at number 9, we have a case that feels like it was pulled straight from a Cold War spy novel. This is the mystery of the Isdal woman. Let's set the scene. It's November 1970 in a remote valley in Norway known as Isdalen, or the Ice Valley. A man and his two young daughters are out hiking when they notice a strange, burnt smell in the air. They follow the scent and come across a horrifying discovery: the partially burned body of a woman, wedged between some rocks in an isolated spot off the main trail. The scene was incredibly strange. The woman's body was found alongside a collection of bizarre items: a bottle of St. Halvard liqueur, two plastic bottles that smelled of gasoline, a packed lunch, and a fur hat. But there were no identifying documents. All the labels on her clothing had been carefully cut out, and any distinguishing marks on her belongings were removed. It was as if someone had gone to great lengths to erase her entire identity, to make her a ghost. The police launched a massive investigation. They soon found two suitcases belonging to the woman at the train station in Bergen. Inside, they found more clues, but these clues only deepened the mystery. They found wigs, non-prescription glasses, several different currencies, and a notepad with some kind of coded message. It seemed this woman was living a life of disguise, constantly changing her appearance and identity. Who was she hiding from? Investigators were able to piece together some of her movements. They discovered she had traveled all over Europe using at least 9 different fake names. She stayed in various hotels in Norway, always paying in cash and checking out without a trace. Witnesses described her as elegant and well-dressed, and she spoke several languages, including German, English, and French, but with an accent no one could quite place. She was a true woman of mystery. The autopsy revealed she had died from a combination of carbon monoxide poisoning from the fire and an overdose of sleeping pills. Soot was found in her lungs, meaning she was alive when she was set on fire. The official ruling was suicide, but so many things just don't add up. Why would someone go to such lengths to erase their identity just to kill themselves in such a remote, brutal way? And what about the coded notes? It all pointed to something much more sinister. The theories are all over the place. Was she a spy caught in the middle of Cold War espionage? Was she involved with some kind of criminal organization and trying to escape? Or was it something else entirely? Despite decades of investigation, including a recent DNA analysis, the Isdal woman's true identity and the circumstances of her death remain a complete and total mystery. She was buried in an unmarked grave, a Jane Doe whose story we may never truly know. Coming in at number 8 is a case that is just absolutely heartbreaking. It's one of the most famous unidentified person cases in American history, and it's known as the story of the boy in the box. In February 1957, in a wooded area in Philadelphia, a college student checking on his muskrat traps stumbled upon a large cardboard box. He didn't think much of it at first, but a few days later, he heard on the radio that a local girl was missing. Worried the box might be related, he went back and looked inside. What he found was the naked, bruised body of a young boy who looked to be between 4 and 6 years old. The boy was wrapped in a plaid blanket, and his body showed signs of severe malnourishment and abuse. He had multiple scars, some of which were surgical, and his hair appeared to have been crudely and recently cut, as clumps of it were still clinging to his body. It was a truly horrific sight, and it was clear this little boy had lived a very hard, short life. The Philadelphia Police Department threw everything they had at this case. They took the boy's fingerprints, they created post-mortem photographs, and they printed hundreds of thousands of flyers with his picture on them, plastering them all over the city and beyond. The flyers were even included in gas bills sent to every home in Philadelphia. They were desperate to give this little boy his name back, to find out who he was and who could have done this to him. But despite the massive publicity, no one came forward. No one reported a boy of his description missing. It was as if he had never existed, as if no one in the world was looking for him. Investigators chased down thousands of leads, from orphanages to foster homes, but every single one led to a dead end. The box he was found in was traced back to a local J.C. Penney, but it was a common type of box and impossible to track to a specific buyer. Over the decades, several theories have emerged. One prominent theory pointed to a nearby foster home, suggesting the boy might have been the child of one of the foster parents, and his death was accidentally covered up. Another lead came from a woman who claimed her abusive mother had bought the boy, abused him to death, and forced her to help dispose of the body. But these leads, while compelling, could never be definitively proven. For over 65 years, the boy remained America's unknown child. The investigators who worked the case never gave up on him, visiting his grave and continuing the search long after they retired. Then, in late 2022, there was a breakthrough. Using modern DNA technology and genetic genealogy, investigators were finally able to identify the boy. His name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli. While we now know his name, the rest of his story, who hurt him and why, remains a mystery that authorities are still working to solve. It's a small piece of justice, but a powerful one for the little boy who was nameless for so long. At number 7, we have a case that is so layered with cryptic clues it honestly sounds like the plot of a Dan Brown novel. This is the Tamam Shud case, also known as the mystery of the Somerton Man. On December 1st, 1948, the body of a man was found lying on Somerton Park Beach in Adelaide, Australia. He was dressed impeccably in a suit and tie, his shoes were clean, and he had an unsmoked cigarette just resting on his collar. There were no signs of violence and he carried no identification. Police were stumped from the get-go. The man's clothes had all the labels removed, just like the Isdal woman. An autopsy was performed and the coroner suspected he may have been poisoned with something rare and untraceable, but, couldn't prove it. His last meal was a pasty, but that didn't offer many clues. His fingerprints were run through records in Australia and internationally, but no match was found. He was a complete ghost. The mystery deepened when months later a suitcase believed to belong to the man was found at the Adelaide railway station. Inside were more clothes with the labels cut out and some stenciling tools, but the biggest clue came from a hidden fob pocket sewn into the man's trousers. Tucked inside was a tiny, rolled-up piece of paper printed with the words Tamam Shud. This phrase is Persian, and it means it is ended or it is finished. It's the final phrase from a collection of poems called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This discovery sent the police on a nationwide hunt for the specific copy of the book that this scrap of paper was torn from. And incredibly, they found it. A man came forward saying he had found a rare first edition of the Rubaiyat in the back of his unlocked car around the time the Somerton Man was discovered. And in the back of that book, the page with Tamam Shud was torn out. But that wasn't all. Inside the book, faintly written in pencil, were what appeared to be a secret code and a phone number. The phone number belonged to a nurse who lived nearby. When police questioned her, she was evasive and seemed terrified. She denied knowing the Somerton Man, but a plaster cast made of the man's head and shoulders revealed he had very distinctive calf muscles, like those of a ballet dancer. And she had once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, which she had given to an army officer named Alfred Boxall. For a moment, police thought they had their man, that the Somerton Man was Alfred Boxall, but then they found Alfred Boxall, alive and well, with his copy of the Rubaiyat, complete with the Tamam Shud page intact. So who was the man on the beach, and why did the nurse have his phone number and seem so frightened? Was it a love affair gone wrong? Was it related to espionage, given the coded message in the post-World War II timing? The code has never been cracked, and the man's identity remains unknown. In 2022, researchers claim to have identified him via DNA as Carl Charles Webb, but this has not been officially confirmed by police, leaving the Tamam Shud case a tantalizing mystery. For our number 6 spot, we're heading to the vibrant, music-filled streets of New Orleans, but, for a story that is decidedly not vibrant. Between 1918 and 1919, the city was gripped by fear, stalked by a terrifying serial killer known only as the Axeman of New Orleans. This killer had a very specific and very brutal Missouri. He would break into his victims' homes, usually by chiseling out a panel on their back door, and then attack them with an axe or a straight razor that he often found inside their own homes. The attacks were vicious and bloody, and they seemed to target Italian-American grocers, though not exclusively. The first known victims were Joseph and Catherine Maggio, who were found brutally murdered in their home. The killer had used their own axe, which he left at the scene, and then used a razor to slit their throats. It was a gruesome scene that sent a shockwave of terror through the community, and it was only the beginning. Over the next year and a half, the Axeman would claim more victims, leaving a trail of blood and terror across the city. He attacked men, women, and even children, including a pregnant woman named Catherine Maggio, and a 2-year-old girl named Mary Bruno who was killed in her sleep. The attacks were so random and the motive so unclear that the police were completely baffled. There was no robbery, no clear connection between all the victims, just pure, unadulterated violence. But what makes this case truly bizarre and lands it on this list is a letter. In March 1919, a letter, claiming to be from the Axeman himself, was published in the newspapers. The letter was arrogant, taunting, and utterly strange. In it, the killer claimed he was not human, but a demon from the hottest hell. He bragged about his killings and mocked the police for being unable to catch him. It was a chilling glimpse into the mind of a madman. And then the letter made a very, very strange demand. The Axeman declared that he would be passing through New Orleans on a specific night, Tuesday, March 19th at 12:15 a.m. He promised to spare anyone who was in a home where a jazz band was playing. He wrote, and I quote, "I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing." As you can imagine, on that Tuesday night, the entire city of New Orleans erupted in music. Every home, dance hall, and bar was filled with the sound of jazz. People who didn't even like jazz blasted it from their windows, terrified of being the Axeman's next victim. It must have been an incredibly surreal night. And, true to his word, no one was murdered that night. Shortly after, the attacks stopped as suddenly as they had begun. The Axeman was never caught, and his identity remains one of the great spooky mysteries of New Orleans. Coming in at number 5 is a case that is every parent's worst nightmare, a story of loss and a mystery that has haunted a family for generations. This is the disappearance of the Sauter children. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sauter family, George, Jenny, and 9 of their 10 children, were at home, celebrating the holiday. An older son, John, was spending the night with his older brother, Joe, who was away in the army. The younger kids were so excited about their new toys that they begged to stay up late. Jenny agreed, on the condition that the older boys, Maurice and Louis, remembered to feed the cows and close the chicken coop before they went to bed. Around 12:30 a.m., the phone rang. Jenny answered it. It was a woman asking for a name she didn't recognize, and in the background, Jenny could hear laughter and clinking glasses, like a party. Jenny told the woman she had the wrong number and hung up, thinking it was just a strange prank call. As she was heading back to bed, she noticed the lights were still on and the front door was unlocked, which was unusual. About an hour later, at 1:30 a.m., Jenny woke up again, this time to the smell of smoke. The house was on fire. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children, John, Marion, George Jr., and Sylvia, managed to escape. But 5 of the children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were trapped upstairs. Panic set in. George frantically tried to get back inside to save them. He broke a window, cutting his arm, but the smoke and flames were too thick. He then rushed to get his ladder to climb to the upstairs windows. But the ladder, which was always kept in the same spot against the side of the house, was missing. It was later found tossed in an embankment about 75 feet away. His next idea was to pull his work trucks up to the house and climb on top of them. But, inexplicably, neither of his trucks would start, even though they had been working perfectly the day before. The phone line was also dead, so they couldn't call for help. A neighbor had to run to a nearby tavern to call the fire department. By the time the fire department arrived, hours later, the Sauter family home had been reduced to nothing but a pile of ash and rubble. The 5 children were presumed dead, their bodies believed to have been incinerated in the intense blaze. The official cause of the fire was listed as faulty wiring. The family was devastated, but they tried to accept their tragic loss and move on. But then, things started to get really strange. Jenny couldn't understand how the fire could have been hot enough to completely cremate the children's bones when other household items like appliances were still recognizable in the debris. She began to suspect the children hadn't died in the fire at all. The family started to believe the fire was a cover for a kidnapping. They found a small, hard rubber object in the ashes, which a fire marshal said looked like a pineapple bomb, a type of hand grenade. And what about the weird phone call, the missing ladder, and the trucks that wouldn't start? It all felt like a coordinated effort. For the rest of their lives, the Sodders searched for their missing children, even putting up a billboard with their pictures. They received tips and alleged sightings for years, including a mysterious photo of a young man resembling Louis, mailed to them in the 1960s, but they never found them. At number 4, we have a case that shows how words can be just as terrifying as any weapon. This is the story of the Circleville letter writer. It all started in 1976, in the small, quiet town of Circleville, Ohio. Residents started receiving anonymous, menacing letters. The letters were written in a distinct, blocky handwriting and contained personal, often embarrassing secrets about the people they were sent to. They accused people of affairs, corruption, and all sorts of scandals. The letters spread fear and paranoia throughout the town. No one knew who was writing them or where they were getting their information. One of the main targets was a school bus driver named Mary Gillespie. The letters accused her of having an affair with the superintendent of schools, Gordon Massey. The letters weren't just sent to Mary, they were sent to her husband, Ron Gillespie, her family, and her co-workers. They were relentless and designed to destroy her reputation. The situation escalated dramatically in August 1977. Ron Gillespie received a phone call, and after hanging up, he grabbed his pistol, stormed out of the house, and drove off in a rage. A short time later, he was found dead in his car, which had crashed into a tree. The gun had been fired once, and his death was ruled an accident by the sheriff, who believed Ron had fired the gun at a sign and then lost control of his vehicle. But many, including his family, believed he was on his way to confront the letter writer and that foul play was involved. After Ron's death, the letters didn't stop. In fact, they became even more threatening. Mary Gillespie and her children continued to be tormented. The letters even threatened Mary's daughter. One day, while driving her bus route, Mary saw a sign posted along the road with a vulgar message directed at her daughter. She stopped the bus, went to pull the sign down, and discovered it was a booby trap. The sign was attached to a string, which led to a box containing a loaded pistol rigged to fire when the sign was moved. This was a clear escalation from letters to attempted murder. The investigation into the booby trap led police to Mary's own brother-in-law, Paul Freshour. A handwriting analysis supposedly linked him to the letters, and the gun in the booby trap belonged to him. Despite maintaining his innocence and claiming he was being framed, Paul Freshour was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to prison. Everyone in Circleville breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the nightmare was finally over. But it wasn't. While Paul Freshour was in prison, the letters started up again. They continued to terrorize the residents of Circleville, and even Freshour himself received a letter in prison mocking him. This cast serious doubt on his guilt. How could he be sending letters from behind bars? He even worked with the TV show Unsolved Mysteries from Prison to try and clear his name. He was eventually paroled but maintained his innocence until his death. The true identity of the Circleville letter writer who held a small town captive with their poison pen remains a mystery to this day. Alright, for our number 3 spot, we're diving into one of the most famous and baffling mysteries of the 20th century. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. In January 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers, mostly students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, set off on a skiing expedition in the northern Ural Mountains in Russia. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, and they were all skilled and prepared for the harsh winter conditions. They were supposed to send a telegram when they finished their route, but that telegram never came. When they failed to return, a search party was sent out. On February 26th, they found the group's abandoned tent on the slopes of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl, which translates to Dead Mountain, and what they found was deeply disturbing. The tent had been cut open from the inside, as if the hikers had been desperate to escape. All of their belongings, their shoes, their warm clothing, their supplies, were left behind. It was the middle of a brutal Russian winter, with temperatures well below freezing. The search party followed a set of footprints leading away from the tent, down the slope towards a nearby forest. The footprints showed that the hikers were either barefoot or wearing only socks. Why would 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their tent and run out into the freezing wilderness without proper clothing or shoes? It made absolutely no sense. The first 2 bodies, Yuri Krivonechenko and Yuri Doroshenko, were found under a large pine tree next to the remains of a small fire. They were dressed only in their underwear. 3 more bodies, including that of group leader Igor Dyatlov, were found between the pine tree and the camp. It appeared they had been trying to crawl back up to the tent. They all seemed to have died of hypothermia. For 2 months, the search continued for the remaining 4 hikers. They were finally found in a ravine, buried under more than 10 feet of snow. And this is where the story takes an even darker turn. These 4 hikers had suffered horrific violent injuries. One of them, Nicholas Thibault Brignolel, had a fractured skull. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov had major chest fractures, the kind of injuries you would see in a high-speed car crash. And most bizarrely of all, Lyudmila was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips. What could have possibly caused these injuries? There were no signs of a struggle, and the force required was immense. To make things even weirder, some of their clothing was found to be radioactive. The official investigation concluded that the hikers had died as a result of a compelling natural force. This vague explanation has satisfied no one, and it has led to decades of speculation. Theories range from an avalanche, which doesn't explain the lack of external injuries on some or the radioactive clothing, to a secret Soviet weapons test, an encounter with a UFO, or even an attack by a Russian Yeti. To this day, no one knows for sure what happened to those 9 hikers on Dead Mountain. We're at number 2, and this case is straight out of a sci-fi movie. It's so bizarre that it almost sounds made up, but I promise you it's real. This is the story of Gloria Ramirez, who would become known as the Toxic Lady. On the evening of February 19, 1994, Gloria Ramirez was rushed to the emergency room of a hospital in Riverside, California. She was suffering from the advanced stages of cervical cancer and was confused with a rapid heart rate and shallow breathing. The medical staff immediately began to treat her, following standard procedures. A nurse drew blood from Gloria's arm, and that's when things got weird. The nurse, Susan Kane, noticed an unusual, oily sheen on the surface of the blood and a strange, ammonia-like smell coming from the tube. She passed the syringe to a respiratory therapist, Maureen Welch, who also smelled it and agreed something was off. Then, Susan Kane suddenly fainted. Shortly after, Dr. Julie Gorchinsky, a medical resident, also noted the strange smell and saw unusual manila-colored particles floating in Gloria's blood. And then she fainted too. Soon after, Maureen Welch, the respiratory therapist, also collapsed. In total, 23 of the 37 emergency room staff members who were present experienced at least one symptom, and 5 were hospitalized. Their symptoms included fainting, shortness of breath, nausea, and even temporary paralysis. The ER was evacuated and a hazmat team was called in to investigate. Meanwhile, despite the chaos erupting around her, the staff continued to try and save Gloria's life. But sadly, after about 45 minutes of CPR and defibrillation, she was pronounced dead. The question on everyone's mind was, what had just happened? How could one person's body seemingly emit toxic fumes that could take down an entire emergency room staff? The hospital was in lockdown, and a full-scale investigation was launched. The initial investigation was a mess. The hazmat team couldn't find any traces of toxic gases in the ER, An autopsy was performed, but the coroner couldn't determine a cause for the strange event. The whole thing was a medical mystery. The media dubbed Gloria the toxic lady, and wild theories started to fly around, from mass hysteria to exposure to illegal drug lab chemicals, or even some kind of paranormal event. The most prominent scientific theory that eventually emerged came from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. They proposed a complex chemical chain reaction. The theory suggests that Gloria may have been using a solvent called DMSO, or dimethyl sulfoxide, as a homemade pain remedy for her cancer. This solvent, when combined with the oxygen administered by the paramedics and the electricity from the defibrillator, could have transformed into dimethyl sulfate, a highly toxic and volatile chemical warfare agent. This would explain the fumes and the effect on the hospital staff. However, this theory has never been definitively proven, and the family has always disputed it. The case of the toxic lady remains one of the strangest and most unsettling medical mysteries of our time. And here we are at number 1. This case takes us all the way back to 1919 to a quiet country lane in Leicestershire, England. It's a story that has all the elements of a classic British murder mystery: a young victim, a mysterious stranger, and a single iconic clue. This is the Green Bicycle case. The victim was a 21-year-old woman named Bella Wright. On the evening of July 5, 1919, she was seen cycling home from her job at a rubber factory. Bella was not alone. She was seen by several witnesses riding alongside a man on a distinctive green bicycle. They seemed to be chatting amicably. The last person to see her alive was her uncle, who saw her pass by on her bike with the man just a few minutes before she was killed. A short while later, a farmer found Bella's body lying in the road next to her bicycle. At first, it was thought to be a tragic accident, a simple fall from her bike. But when the doctor examined her body, he found a single, small-caliber bullet wound under her left eye. Bella Wright had been murdered. The police immediately began a search for the man with a green bicycle. The case became a media sensation, and the green bicycle became the central image of the mystery. Who was this man? And why would he have shot a young woman he had just met? The investigation led police to the canals near the crime scene. There, they dredged up the frame of a green bicycle. The serial numbers were filed off, but it was a crucial piece of evidence. They also found a leather holster for a pistol. The police now had the murder weapons holster and the killer's bicycle, but they still didn't have a suspect. The trail seemed to go cold for months. Then, in February 1920, almost 7 months after the murder, a breakthrough came. A barge captain, working on the same canal, pulled up a bundle from the water. Inside were the disassembled parts of a pistol and some ammunition. The police now had the bicycle, the holster, and the gun. They were able to trace the bicycle's parts to a man named Ronald Light, a 34-year-old former soldier and schoolteacher who lived nearby. When police questioned Ronald Light, he admitted to being the man with Bella that day. He said they had cycled together, but that they had parted ways and he had no idea what happened to her afterward. He claimed he panicked when he heard about her murder, fearing he would be blamed. So, he dismantled his green bicycle and his service revolver and threw them in the canal. He seemed like the perfect suspect, but at his trial, his defense was brilliant. He was portrayed as a shell-shocked war veteran who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. In a stunning verdict, the jury found him not guilty. Ronald Light walked free, and the murder of Bella Wright was never officially solved. Did an innocent man panic, or did a clever killer get away with murder? And that's it for our countdown of 10 of the most bizarre true crime cases I've ever come across. From the Axeman's strange love of jazz music to the mystery of the Somerton man's coded message, these stories really do prove that truth is often stranger than fiction. It's the unanswered questions that make these cases so haunting and so fascinating. It's what keeps us, the true crime community, coming back to them, hoping that one day, new technology or a new lead will finally give us the answers we're looking for. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today while I got ready and talked about these wild stories. I know it was a long one, but there was just so much to unpack with each case. If you enjoyed this video and you want to dive into more mysteries with me, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. It really helps out my channel, and it means I get to keep making these videos for you guys. Before you go, I have to know, which of these cases did you find the most bizarre? Was it the Dyatlov Pass incident with all its unexplained horrors? Or maybe the toxic lady? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm really looking forward to reading your theories and seeing which case shocked you the most. Stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.